you looking for an album that makes you feel like this? Welcome back to On the Flip Side. My name is Adam Shawwalker, and today we're going to be covering the Beach Boys' 17th studio record, Surf's Up. The Beach Boys should require little to no introduction, but if you don't know who they are, go take a visit down to your local water park and spend about 5 minutes there, and you'll figure it out pretty goddamn quickly. Despite the Beach Boys having a very iconic and cheery tone throughout most of their earlier material through most of the early 60s, the Beach Boys would become more and more introspective as time went on through the releases of their albums, and in 1966 would release a very introspective record, Pet Sounds. From here on out, pretty much all of the Beach Boys' recorded material would be much more of a personal focus through the lens of the band on how the world was. This record was a turning point for them, which would lead up to their later era years, post-Capitol Records, 1971's Beach Boys' Surf's Up. Track listing on this one is side 1, we have Don't Go Near the Water, Long Promised Road, Take a Load Off Your Feet, Disney Girls, 1957, Student Demonstration Time, and for side 2 we have Feel Flows, Looking at Tomorrow, a welfare song, A Day in the Life of a Tree, Till I Die, and Surf's Up. We're going to give side 1 a listen, we'll come back to you on the flip side. Alright, so first track on the record is Don't Go Near the Water. Pretty much immediately the tone of this album takes like a really melancholy approach to songwriting. You can kind of tell that Don't Go Near the Water is very much a self-critique of the Beach Boys' earlier catalog and material, specifically their early 60s stuff with things like Surfin' USA. The band at this point is pretty much moving away from those kind of themes. However, on the surface, a lot of the tone and writing is pretty consistent. You can kind of tell that the steps away from that sound were very prevalent on the minds of the band at this point, as this album, I believe, at one point was going to be called Landlocked. At least that was a working title for it. So you can tell that they're definitely stepping away more from that sound and moving into something a little bit more personal. Track 2 on the record is Long Promised Road. A very slow and like depression-induced start to this track is juxtaposed almost immediately with some up-tempo, sort of jazzy, bluesy, gospel-like choruses. This may be one of the more tongue-in-cheek songs on the record, just with how the writing is and the formatting between these slow segments and these faster segments. It's not really much faster, but it's definitely more upbeat. You can tell the key has gone from like minor to major here. The slow segments are genuinely very beautiful and attention-gripping. The pacing of the track is graceful, and the upbeat tempo grooves are really catching as well. This is probably one of my favorite tracks on the record, just with how well it dances in between these two sort of segments of the track here. Track 3 is Take a Load Off Your Feet, another lower tempo kind of jaunty track about self-care. Adds quite a bit of silliness to the record as well. Once again, more of the tongue-in-cheek kind of themes on here, and it kind of goes to show that the Beach Boys are a little bit touch and go with their seriousness on this album. It's one of the shorter tracks on the record too. Probably one of the more redundant tracks on the record, although I wouldn't leave it out of the track listing just for the context of this album. I think it works pretty well where it sits. Track 4 on the record is Disney Girls. This reverb-heavy ballad is really loaded with emotion and character. Everything here screams of sentimental attitudes and escapism, wanting to return to like simpler times and simpler attitudes, simpler loves. This ode to like artificial love is entirely touching, and I think in most ways absolutely not in line with how the world really works. At this point in history, and even now, I think that this is sort of a romanticization of the idea of romanticizing love. And I think that in itself is sort of like a way for the band to like cancel out like a double negative here of that attitude. I think it's a critique as much as it is a love song to the idea of love. It's very well done, and honestly, this track right here is probably the most important track on this record, in my opinion. Track 5 on the record, we have Student Demonstration Time. One of the more timely songs on the record talks about the Kent State Massacre in May of 1970 in a very like kind of out-of-place blues rock sort of style. While being a really fun track instrumentally, this song feels kind of out of place in the middle of this record, especially having just been after Disney Girls on this thing, and as well as some of the other more down-tempo tracks. I think the dark lyrics being juxtaposed with like this up-tempo rock still kind of works for the mood. This is more of the Beach Boys being very tongue-in-cheek in their writing, and I think just the dark themes and, I mean, people literally being shot and killed by police officers in Kent State. One of the more powerful sort of statements on this record, just putting it side by side with these cheery themes, and I think it's probably a way to sort of take a magnifying glass on the times and just kind of view this context and this chaos from an outside lens of 2021, the world we're living in now. I mean, this album is 50 years old at this point, so to go back and to put a magnifying glass to this and really dig into it, I think you can really tell the sign of the times, and you know, the world is changing, things are a little bit crazy. I think that's absolutely this theme here, is just writing a song that would not fit the theme purposefully for the fact that it was such an outrageous event that occurred. I think that it, while tonally, like literally audibly, it is a bit out of place in the middle of the record, I think it fits right in with the themes of the time. So that is side one of the record. We will come back to you here soon and see you on the flip side. Alright, we are back with side 2 of the record. Track 6 off of the record is Feel Flows. More lovely, really full reverb tones kick off this slow piano-heavy intro. This really interesting, like, reverb vocal reverse shimmer effect goes on as well that adds to this watery effect. It's really well done on this track specifically. This is one of, I'd say, the more thematically and tonally consistent songs on the record here. After a bit of time, the lyrics kind of fade back to some crunchy, subdued guitars, and this really absolutely killer, just wonderful flute solo on this thing that comprises a good segment of the track here. The Beach Boys also use some synths here to sort of plot along the track here as accent pieces. This one is definitely one of the tracks that I had slept on a bit before, and I think this one fits really well here in the track listing. Side 2 of the record definitely seems to shift somehow even more slow and a bit even more introspective than side 1 was. I think mostly just with the lack of like silliness in some of these songs. Really a lot of like the tongue-in-cheek attitude from side A has left the building in a lot of senses on the second half of the album. It is a lot more solemn, it is a lot more slow. It really wants you to focus more on what the band is having, you know, a chance to say, and it wants you to just like analyze yourself while you're listening to it, and I think this song really kicks off that theme super well. Track 7 is Looking at Tomorrow, a Welfare song, one of the shorter tracks on the album, probably, it might be the shortest track on the record here. Really just killer acoustic track, leads into this album, and it's definitely the focal point of this track as well, with some really gentle vocals that really flow through the song and play off of the rhythm here as well. This is another one of those tracks that I hadn't really listened to as much. This track, I wish it was longer. Like, it's probably the perfect length, but I wish that there was a little bit more here. I think it's meant more as like an interlude or sieg track, but I think like the way that they present it just really leaves me wanting more. But that being said, really excellent track on this thing. Track 8 is A Day in the Life of a Tree. Needless to say, this is a song from the perspective of a tree. It lands a little bit weird here, as a lot of the instrumentals here are like woodwind instruments and organs, which I think sort of fit the theme that they're going with, of like very breezy, sort of windy kind of days and like trees blowing about in the wind. This song, you know, has a bit of a focus on environmentalism and pollution, another strong theme as well, and there's a message here, obviously, of, you know, pollution's bad and all that. It lands a little weird just because of the way it's presented, I think. I don't think it's meant to be like I was saying with the earlier tracks, I don't think this set is really meant to be as tongue-in-cheek, but this song I think comes across as a little bit unintentionally silly. I think that there's a chance that they wrote this song with some intention of it being a bit silly, but at the same time, the way it's presented is very genuine, so I'm not entirely sure. It lands a little odd here on the track listing, just by the way it's presented. It's not a bad song, it's just it's a little ill-fitting to a lot of the serious tones. While it is about a serious subject matter, it just comes across as like disingenuine while trying to be genuine. It's odd. The track itself has some really nice organ work on it, and the flutes are really wonderful as well here. The lyrics are a little goofy, but overall, I'd say this is definitely kind of a take it or leave it track. This could have been on the album or not, I'd say. Track 9 is Till I Die. More organ and woodwind, sort of leading off from the last track on here, lead this track. There's lyrical themes of like being a castaway and not quite making any of the pieces fit and not being able to quite fit in the world anywhere. And it's presented through the lens of like a castaway and being set out at sea, not knowing where you're going and not knowing where the current is going to lead you. And it's definitely one of the most obviously very solemn tracks on the record, and another very short track as well. The final track on the record is Surf's Up. Definitely takes a very broad and sweeping approach to very just beautiful and stunning instrumentation on this thing, with full and lush soundscapes that really cap off the record wonderfully. I really can't understate that enough. This song is just like the buffet of just like how pretty can we make it, with multiple segments all complementary to each other that wrap up the entire record. This song just builds off of one part from one to the next, adding more parts on top of each other for a really graceful close to this album. Now, I have not always been a very big fan of the Beach Boys, and like I was mentioning at the beginning of this video, if you didn't know who the Beach Boys were, you could visit your local water park and know within 5 minutes, and that was my initial impression of the Beach Boys for a very long time. I hate Surfin' USA. That song sucks. But I think most of what the Beach Boys have in their later discography is just pure gold. I didn't really get into Pet Sounds that much for a long time. I thought it was quite overrated. I listened to it, and you know, just about this time last year, it finally all kind of started to click. You know, the sort of subdued, depressive tones with like lots of like beautiful harmonizing like segments of tracks. Just all of these themes are just sort of meshed super well with the writing style of Brian Wilson and company, and they have just constructed these wonderful late era albums that are completely unlike all of their earlier material that would be played at a fucking water park. And these albums, specifically Surf's Up, I think for me is like the biggest breakthrough for my enjoyment of the Beach Boys. And I think this record has a lot of, you know, good stuff to offer. And if you haven't listened to this album and you're not really keen on the Beach Boys, you know, a lot of people would recommend Pet Sounds right off the bat, and I think a lot of people have already heard a lot of the songs in that record and it didn't quite grasp them. So if you have not gotten into the Beach Boys and you would like to attempt to, Surf's Up is a great starting point. This is not a flawless record, however, it is a very apt record for just how chaotic the early 70s were, with things like the Kent State Massacre, things like the Vietnam War. Various large cultural sweeping changes across the country and across the world were happening at this time, and I think that this, you know, all of those feelings and a lot of helplessness have been channeled into this record and a lot of the Beach Boys records from this time. Thank you so much for watching. More to come soon. If you like this video, please subscribe to the channel to see more content like this one. Leave a like. Let me know what I should review. What did you think of this record? Have you listened to it? Did this video make you want to listen to it? Thank you so much for following the channel, and just thank you guys for everything. We'll see you on Thursday.